Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. My name is Lorraine Karai, and I'm honored to welcome you all to today's roundtable entitled Uncut Truths, Unpacking the Persistence of FGMC in the Greater Horn of Africa and the Path to Eradication. This is the second session in our regional It's Not Your Fault webinar series under the We Cannot Wait project that is coordinated by SIHA Network and supported by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today we'll be discussing FGMC. It's not a health issue, it's not a cultural dilemma, it's violence against women and girls, a violation that mutilates bodies, undermines agency, and upholds control over women's sexuality and lives. And yet, this struggle is not new. We've seen and we've been part of communities that have been resisting FGMC for decades and decades, with significant resources invested to address violence against women and girls in this region. And still, we ask the same question: why are we still here? Why are we still talking about this? Across the region, we've seen significant investments for decades in advocacy, awareness, speaking out, surviving, organizing, and law reform aimed at eliminating violence against women and girls. And yet today we are still asking what went wrong? Why are we still fighting the same battle? And why is FGMC still performed in some places with the same frequency or even greater secrecy than before? Their numbers we are going to be listening to in this webinar, and some include Somalia with a prevalence of over 99%, which is among the highest globally. In Sudan, more than 87% despite a legal ban. In Ethiopia, it exceeds 90%, and Kenya, among others, around 15%. These figures are not just statistics, they reflect millions of girls and women whose bodies have been harmed, whose rights have been denied, and whose voices are often silenced. So, this session today is not about repeating what FGM is, it's about facing the reality that despite laws, declarations, and decades of a lot of work, the practice continues. Today, we will focus on approaches and practices. We will be talking about methodologies and strategies, what has worked and what hasn't, and what are the key driving factors and root causes that continue to undermine this progress. And we encourage you today throughout the session, whether you're joining us online or from one of our regional hubs, to share questions in the chat or the Q&A section. We ask that you respond to a poll question, which we will share in the middle of this webinar, and we'll share participants' feedback survey. We also request that you introduce yourself in the chat box because we'd love to know who's in the room. If you'd like your message to be seen by everyone, please direct it to everyone in the chat. And for private messages, you can select a participant or one of the panelists to respond to it. We have 120 minutes for this webinar and we'll attempt to accommodate all questions. If your question isn't answered during the session, please feel free to reach out to the SIHA team via info@sihanet.org. You'll receive a response as soon as it's possible. I also want to share that we have translation services that have been provided. The webinar is being conducted in English with translations available in Amharic, Arabic, and Somali. And if you'd like to access interpretation, click the interpretation icon. That's the globe symbol at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Select either English, Arabic, Amharic, or Somali from the list of languages. You may choose to mute original audio if you prefer to only hear the translated version and the translated language. You're welcome to share content from the presentations made during this event. However, to protect confidentiality and the safety of participants, please do not share any identifying information. This could be names or photos without explicit consent. We encourage open discussion and welcome different viewpoints. Please be respectful in your communication with panelists as well as with participants. I would like to by saying that we will have the webinar recorded and we'll also take a group photo at the end of this webinar. So let's begin this vital discussion, one that we are hoping will be rooted in truth, in accountability, and in solidarity. With that, I'm honored to introduce our speakers. I'll start with our first speaker, Dr. Lamia Ibrahim Badri, who's a Sudanese scholar and a gender and development specialist with over 20 years of experience in women's rights, particularly in humanitarian and conflict-affected contexts. She holds a PhD in women, legal rights within the customary laws and works at the intersection of gender, reproductive health, and the abandonment of harmful practices such as FGM, using culturally grounded and Islamic informed approaches. Dr. Mariam Bahir is our second speaker. She's a Somali medical doctor and public health expert with extensive experience in GBV and FGM prevention and response. For decades, she has led and contributed to strengthening survivor-centered care, integrating GBV into health systems, and shifting harmful social norms through community engagement and policy advocacy. She has designed and facilitated capacity building platforms and developed simplified referral pathways for FGM survivors in displaced communities and led research on community attitudes towards FGM and feminist approaches to humanitarian response. Our third speaker is Veronica Kamanga, who is UNICEF Senior Advisor on Prevention of Harmful Practices and is the Global Coordinator of the Joint Program on Ending FGM and Child Marriage at UNICEF. She's worked in South Asia, Afghan, and also in several countries across Africa, including Uganda and South Sudan. Our fourth speaker is Hania Muhammad, who is the founder and director of a local organization in Ethiopia, Beza for Women Development Association, and as a concerned adolescent by the persistent levels of violence against women, among a group of 25 friends, birthed the idea to create a space to address these issues. With that, I would now like to move on to our first speaker, Dr. Lamia. Drawing from your experience across the region and Sudan, what community-led and culturally grounded strategies have shown the greatest promise in challenging FGM, particularly in contexts shaped by conflict, displacement, and deeply, deeply entrenched patriarchal norms? We know you've been working on these issues for several decades. How can FGM truly be addressed? Can it be addressed truly in isolation from the broader systems of violence and control against women? Or will this risk overlooking the deeper root causes? And also, from your practical experience, what did you do? How did it go? What strategies were employed? Did it work? What methodologies or power dynamics did you have to navigate? And also reflecting on the externally driven interventions that may overlook local realities. What are their limitations and what needs to be done? What shifts need to be used as we think about sustainability and women's agency when it comes to addressing FGMC? Over to you, Dr. Lamia.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren. I would like to thank also SIHA for this great initiative. And I would like to thank all the team that working on that, plus the other panelists and people who are attending. FGM has been an issue that it has been really deeply rooted in not even the culture, but also the religion. And despite, I would like to say, centuries of practicing this practice, it proved that it's not easy to just to tackle it from one single or several aspects. It remains widespread across Africa and even MENA region, and that has affected us greatly. It persists and lays deep inside our social norms, misinterpreted religion, and also in the teachings and patriarchal structure. And that's why fighting it or abandonment of it require different techniques. And we supposed to be like updating and revisiting our techniques. And I would like to say something about Sudan because I believe that we have been addressing this issue since recently, which has been written in our recent history. It started in 1940s of the last century when a community-based organized movement organized itself against these practices. To the extent that the British colonizer, so that they will assist the community in forming a law against FGM, and that happened in 1964. And I always use that even for the funder, especially the British, that since you issued a law in 1964, you're supposed to support that further. But unfortunately, because it was not the law itself was not based on the local movement, some Sudanese nationalists rejected that laws, take it as intervention in something locally. So this gives us a lesson that we're supposed to be visited sometimes. And I'm going to discuss that later on my this brief presentation, that when things come from other people or foreign people, it always get stopped. What happened now in Sudan? I'm going to jump to come to the recent time. Because of the conflict and the civil war going on, we have great change in the dynamic of the spread of the FGM and also on abandonment of it. Because people lose the proper housing and people start to live in camps together from different regions of Sudan. This affect the spread of the practice because some people, like especially like group from Blue Nile, they were not even aware of the practice itself. But when they came and lived with people from the center and far west of Sudan, they became aware of this practice and they start adopting it, and that was concern for us. And also because of the fear of the severe accident of rape that's taken place, some people start moving from the milder form of FGM to the severe form of FGM. What happened that we start the youth and even grandmothers, since they have ample time in their camps and in their they lost their jobs and their schooling. So they became free in a way that they start advocating among all the people, IDBs and others, against FGM. And that's worked very nicely because some youth, they start experience, telling their experience of living with this FGM and C practices. This is one of the issues that I believe that work very nicely. So this is the concern about IDBs, and because of the lack of proper services and health services, we also convince the midwife and those who practice the practice and they benefit out of it, that this is gonna create a huge economic burden on the already devastated health services. And we're supposed to stop doing that for the sake of other people. Plus, people who are so busy with their livelihood, they sometimes tend to forget that certain girls have reached the age of the cut and they forget about it. So in now we are using all that to make a huge campaign regarding that. Before that, when we have when we are in a development setting, there was a successful campaign in Sudan, and I would like to recall Salima campaign, because previously there used to be a stigma and naming associated to uncut girl, that they smell and they are unhealthy. So there was a campaign supported by UNICEF called Salima, because they want to take the negative name of uncut girl to make it to shift the norm to that she's Stelima, which is intact, which is complete, which means she's healthy. That's very good for the sake of the girls. But by the time we realize that working on UNFPA, that this shifting the stigma from uncut girl, that we move it to the cut girls and cut women. Because for UNFPA, the main things is like reproductive health and right. So the cut women have more focus as an adult and as an adolescent than girls. And therefore, we form a kind of a different campaign based on a religious understanding with the verses of the Quran, Al-Mawadda wal-Rahma. So that campaign, we say Al-Mawadda wal-Rahma, we have to be affectionate and merciful towards cut women and cut girls as well as uncut girls. And that campaign worked very nicely because we use the religious as the same as the cultural norms, and also to appeal for the practitioner and the government that sometimes supported this cut, and even they even put money and fund to support the cut. So that campaign was really good for Sudan, and it worked nicely, especially that with the joint program with UNICEF and UNFPA. The other thing that we have been used, because the faith-based approach is also being used to support the justice system. Like we have been asked to revisit our laws to address all laws that are working against girls and women. And at that time, we used to have a little bit of leniency from the government, and we were allowed to work on the articles of laws that support FGM. But anyway, most of our intervention, we just touch on things, but not going deeply inside of issue things. The use and intergeneration mobilization is also being used in Sudan because we realize that grandmothers are the link between the past and the recent time. So we focus on grandmothers because in Sudan they have this ceremonial of like drinking coffee, and we approach that ceremonies like advocating for grandmother and make them a change agent, and that's also worked nicely because we believe we're supposed to address something in the past since the issue is very remotely. What is our limitation? Like we have tried everything, the health dimension, the culture, the religion, and different kind of things, but it's still this practice is persist. I believe that we have forgotten something. We must have done something that let this practice continue. So I like to say that because it's a fragmented approach, we have never applied all this intervention in one area. So we have been always advocating that let's take one area and try all these different strategies and do it together, like the law, the religion, the cultural norms, and even the reproductive health and right and sexuality. And I believe sexuality, when we say marriageability, we are not talking about why marriageability is a root causes for this practice, simply because of sexuality. In Sudan, and I believe also in the region here, we believe that women are not entitled for having sexual rights. The sexual right is for men. And in Sudan, we have this misconception about tight vagina. It's like make sexual gratification for men, and that's why women do it even for themselves, and men are keep and being silent. So we started like talking about the private part and how is that is being perceived like an ugly part, it's like a dirty part, and it needs to be cut. And I would like to share something with you that when we show a complete private part of women, most of the women they didn't recognize that because simply they have been cut by the age of 3 and 5. So in a way, yani, we have to expose them that there is nothing ugly in that part. And sometimes that work yani, effectively. So we shouldn't go to the fragmented approach. We have to concentrate everything. Another issue which is very important that we overlook the local power dynamic. We believe that we design projects in our nice offices and bring it down to the people, and we overlook the local power and dynamic. So we have really to start investing on the local communities and develop things together, not being broadly. Another thing that the midwives are very important, especially because UNFPA is supporting that part. Midwives supposed to be not only trained but also to be mobilized, because for Sudan it's kind of income because they get paid and they have a generous gift after they cut each girl, and even there is circumcision or population for married women are for like actively sexual women. Another thing that the lack of sustainability usually is not there in our project because there is no sense of ownership. And I have been talking to many communities, even in the region. They said this is a UN intervention. UN supposed to come and continue it, especially when the project finished after 3 or 5 years. Then they go, okay, UNFPA, come and look after your project. What happened? UNICEF, this is your project. What is going to happen? So the sense of ownership is not really there, and thus need to be changed. We need to change our fragmented approach, and we need to go from the narrow and top-down approach to a locally led justice-centered strategies that are developed to last, that are built to last. Uh, and I would like to reiterate myself again that sexuality is a part that has not been probably covered. What, do I have time or?
Yes, Dr. Lamia, I think we are out of time. I'll give you 1 minute to
Okay.
summarize.
I just want to summarize that the what I like to say that the initiative between even the joint project between UN agency is also great in doing that, because when UNICEF is dealing with the child, it just end up at the child. But when come with UNFPA, then the UNFPA move to adolescent and adult women, which make it like a very compact and like a good sign kind of things. And we also would like to support the national legal reforms itself, like other issues from Kenya and also the Tosan. And we have so many good things in Africa that we're supposed to benefit from each other. And I hope this initiative today will support us in coming together and having something uh, sustainable. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lamia. And you also made reference to the Salama advocacy work. We will, during this webinar, hear from them, the work they've done, and them sharing some of the best practices around what worked and what didn't. Thank you again, Dr. Lamia. So we'll be moving on to Dr. Mariam, who's going to be joining in from, the Somali region. Somalia, Somaliland have the highest prevalence rates globally, 99% plus. And the type 3 is often justified through religious arguments, despite the growing theological opposition and fatwa campaigns rejecting the practice. So just tell us, how have the false or politicized religious narratives been used to legitimize FGMC? What are the most promising ways communities, faith leaders, or women's movements have pushed back against these interpretations, and what needs to be done? This is a learning space that has been created, and we are looking forward to hear from you on what needs to be shifted, both at community and institutional level, for the religious justification to lose its power. Over to you, Dr. Mariam.
Thanks a lot, Lauren, for that amazing start and the question. And I'm happy to join you in this great webinar. I'm seeing there's a lot of hubs actually, and a lot of people in the hubs that's coming together. And I feel this is an amazing initiative that all the borders, all the regional teams are coming together and listen to each other, which is something very important. Thanks to SIHA again for inviting me. Your question is amazing. I thought about it and I have some small notes to share with you. As we know, FGM is harmful. That's a clear cut. FGM, all the types. I really want to be clear. Every form of FGM is harmful. all forms violate the rights of women and girls. All forms leave behind a physical, emotional, and psychological scars. No level of harm should ever be accepted, minimized, or normalized. In Somaliland, Somalia, one of the biggest challenges we face is FGM, female genital mutilation or female genital cut, all the types. Sometimes we see the type 3 is diminishing and there is some types actually emerging. Type 3 is now going somehow lower in the urban areas and also within the educated population. But type 1 or type 3, type 2, which they call it Sunnah and Sunnah 1, whatever Sunnah 2, is actually emerging, which is a very, very, very critical. It is widely believed to be religious obligations. Because we call it Sunnah, we call it somehow linked with the religion, make his religious requirements or obligations. And I say this with a heavy heart because I have seen how false and politicized religious narratives have been used to justify the cut and to justify the practice, as well to sustain it. Because one woman leaders and women movements and also the activists actually pushing back the FGM, there is a one narrative comes always. Is Sunnah, we need to cut the girls, it's circumcision. In Somali, we call it halalain, which means that circumcision, it means like making this person purified. And it's something that labeling the word and the practice to look like something that the girl needs, which is not. I want to be also clear that our religion, Islam, never encourages violence. In fact, it is a religion of mercy, dignity, and protection. FGM can't be in that religion at all. FGM is a violence. It cannot be or should not be referred as a religion, specifically our religion. Any act that causes the lifelong harm and suffering to the girls cannot be aligned to the values of our faith. Misusing the religion to justify violence not only degrades the girls, but also it damages the integrity, our integrity. If we get a girl who is 5 years old, opening her legs and cutting her parts, and we call it a religion, that is actually breaks or damages our integrity. In reality, FGM is a practice, is a cultural practice. Let us put it in this way. Let us change our narratives because somehow we call it religion and then people see it as a religion. But if we as an activist, as a woman, as those who are involved and also the victims and survivors, I'm a survivor of FGM. Actually, I'm a survivor of type 2 of FGM, which means that I hate it because not only those who are activities, those who are coming out, and not only those who have been subjected to type 3, but also as an activist, I have been subjected to type 2, and the perpetrator of my FGM was a female nurse. That's how I became a doctor. I really hated what she did to me, and I didn't like it, and I knew that was a wrong thing. So whatever we are asking, like the fatwas, specifically the one came in 2018 from Somaliland, they were abandoning or they were criminalizing type 3, and they were encouraging type 1 and type 2 and asking the health workers to cut the girls, which was something that actually hurts me because that's how I have been subjected to FGM. So the fatwas is there, the people actually trying to, there's a religious leaders are coming on board, talking about it, but there's a certain, connotations are coming on board. Also, we cannot ignore the cross-border dynamics because Somalia has a large border, specifically Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Kenya, All of these three countries, actually, they have a law prohibiting FGM. But in Somalia at large, and Somaliland as well, we don't have that kind of law. So people actually crossing the borders and having they're crossing the borders, they're cutting the girls and going out. That shows us this is not only national issue, it's a regional issue, because Somaliland, we need to work together, all of these three, four countries up to Sudan, and all have a unity to face against the FGM. Because it can be, if you have a great laws in your countries and we don't have, that's also another challenge. That also the progress in one country could be undone by a short trip to the other country. There is a hope as well. We have hopes. Not only bad things happening, as I was sharing, but there is a hope. We are seeing resistance and pushback, specifically activists, medical doctors, actually health professionals, although some of them actually are perpetrators or cutting the girls at the hospitals or health centers, and it's even at homes. But still there is ways that we actually talk about FGM, and specifically medical evidence that we are giving to the faith leaders. Faith leaders are coming on board actually and talking about FGM, against FGM. Some of them actually, I had imams that was fiercely against all the time, all the talk about FGM. Some of them, as an activist, I started in 2012, actually, when I just graduated from the medical school and I started talking about FGM. Some of the communities actually did not want to hear anything about FGM, specifically the religious leaders, and also they never wanted anybody to speak about FGM. But now I see the change. People actually talking about it. There is some dialogues happening either in social media, also in every sphere or in every spaces. I have seen youth actually engage in this kind of a work and also against it and asking questions. Why these things happening? And if we start with the youth, if we focus with the youth, they are the future. Let us focus the youth, because I believe the youth are the one who can cut this circle. I have seen also politicians, like member of parliaments, ministers actually supporting policies and also bills that's also with the side of the zero tolerance or abandoning all the types of FGM. So there is some good things happening. We really need to revitalize it, work on it, and make it some energies, all of these spheres. Youth to have also women. Women was the great, I think Lamia said was the decades or maybe centuries was happening. I remember the women actually speaking about FGM in Somalia from long time, back to 80s, back to 90s, and they have put their efforts, and I really wanted to thank them. They actually paved the way for other. What should be done? Let me conclude it. What is still need to be shift or to be done? We need to work with the communities, and I think I'm in line with the first speaker. Let us bridge the gap between the religious leaders and also the families. Also, the local voices, localizations of this work, it is very crucial. If we work with the women, if we work with the families, if we go down to the communities, I think this is something that and I'm giving this, task to everybody in this room and everybody in the hub's room. You come from a family, you come from a community. Let us sensitize them, speak to them, and have. I think also I would love to conclude with the institutional level. We need strong partnerships between the partners, between the religious Minister of Religion, as well as the Women's Affairs, Health. let us work together, because I am seeing now every ministry, every partner, actually they are working in silos. They are just designing their projects alone, coming to the community, implementing it, and then after that project goes, everything is finished. So let us look also sustainability. As I said, I started the work of FGM since 2012, and I have seen a lot of projects coming 2 to 3 years and then goes, all that information goes out, and then another one started from afresh, which is a very, very, very critical. I truly believe the shift will happen when communities understand that protecting girls from FGM is not rejecting our faith and our religion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mariam. And you raise a number of very important points, including the cross-border dynamics, the need to work together. I would like to remind everyone on this webinar that we have the chat function open. If you have any comments, any questions, please feel free to put them in there and address them to a particular panelist. Also use the Q&A and all your questions will be responded to immediately. I would now like to invite our third speaker, Veronica Njiko. And your question is that we are aware UNFP and UNICEF have recently produced a report accelerating action towards FGM elimination. Would like you to share the lessons that have emerged on what truly works to end FGM, particularly designing context-specific community-led strategies, and how can these go beyond awareness raising to addressing the deep-rooted social norms and power dynamics. From the previous two speakers, this has been coming out as one of the main issues, as well as the existence of laws in certain contexts, but this is very weak. So what needs to be done? Over to you, Veronica.
Thank you so much, Lauren and SIHA Net, for inviting me to speak and also listen to the powerful voices from my previous speakers. I think I feel privileged to listen to Dr. Ramia and Dr. Miriam, and I've also been following the chat in terms of the need for strategic partnerships and how we ensure the programming are sustainable, one of which is through localization or working with community. So I'm very, very pleased to reflect also on the findings from the UNFPA UNICEF Global Program 2024 report, named Accelerating Action Towards FGM Elimination. It's one of a comprehensive synthesis of what we know works, what is effective to end FGM, with huge thanks to the 17 countries that are implementing this flagship global program. As Lamia has mentioned, 16 countries in Africa, with one Indonesia in South Asia. And looking at the report with a collection of all the partners, most of them are here and outside, we are at a pivotal moment. We do know that, looking from the statistics that you did present, Lauren, earlier on, and what my colleague will be projecting, we know that progress has been made hugely. I would not want to repeat some. I think both the previous speakers have touched on them and many other examples, but we still have an even progress or momentum within a different country contexts. And then, of course, the momentum is building in many of our high prevalence countries, thanks to the voices of survivors, thanks to the partners that are working on the ground. And we now have clear evidence, like I mentioned, and I think I also shared with the SIHA Net, a document that we produced recently on what works to end FGM across the board, with learnings from huge work from all of us. And then particularly when it comes to designing community-led and context-specific strategies. And ending FGM requires not just raising awareness, it means fundamentally transforming social norms, cultural norms, power structures, power dynamics, and institutions that allow the practice to exist. I think I would still quote Dr. Ramia, who mentioned that the approach is not a one-size-fits-all, is not one strategy. It has to be a multi-sectoral approach, a myriad of factors that should contribute to ending FGM. And what the evidence tells us on what is working on ending FGM, of course, guided by the context. The very first one from the report, integrated community-led strategies. They have been proven to be most effective, and evidence from our report shows that change happens when programming strategies entirely involving the whole of a community, the men, the grandmothers, the women, the girls on empowerment agency, the boys, the religious and traditional leaders in a collective reflection and dialogue that shifts values, not just knowledge. And these processes change harmful norms and foster social expectations, including the new ones. And then the second also effective intervention is also operating from the socio-ecological model from our global program, which is doing the fourth phase now. I think we've also seen where there's strong evidence, particularly when we focus on girls' formal education, like Dr. Mariam has said. One, to protect herself or to protect the children and the community within her locality through empowerment and agency within the adolescent girl. Like Dr. Lamia has said, I think we've also seen health education in some of the contexts, including training or utilizing the health providers to respond and prevent female genital mutilation. In others is community health workers, others is midwives, and also changing norms around these health workers, because we continue to see many of the countries like Egypt and many other where FGM medicalization, as Dr. Mariam has said, continue to be on the rise. So what is a better approach to use health facilities or health workers as an entry point to address FGM, and then dialogue, as I mentioned earlier on, and then the necessary media and social marketing campaigns that are context specific and speaking to the narrative of the particular country. I think quoting Dr. Lamia still, we also found that single intervention, they don't work at all. For example, standalone awareness campaigns will pumping in resources to do community mobilization awareness, one-time declaration, they have limited impact, but a combination of different mechanisms that are long-term, multi-pronged, that addresses power, dynamics, norms, and accountability systems. And then we also see that to sustain FGM, we need to invest in context-specific, as I said. Context is important. What has worked in Somalia provides lessons, but may not work wholesomely in Indonesia. So what does that context tell us that fits within that particular context? And as my previous speaker said, community-driven, and this is where the global program, the joint program on ending FGM by UNFPA and UNICEF, we consider the approach on community-driven, gender transformative, that move beyond awareness, but transforming the social incentives and the power structures, as the previous speakers have mentioned, and also grounded in trusts that can also be sustainable, defined by the community. Then I can just also from the report quickly highlight some of the country-specific insights for which are community-driven that have worked. For example, in Ethiopia, I've seen Ethiopian colleagues there. We've also seen that Ethiopia stands out as an example of a structured community-driven change through the joint program, co-development community dialogue tools, public monitoring boards were set up to track progress on indicators like FGM and child marriage, which turn commitments into collective accountability. When it comes to Somalia and Sudan, I think Dr. Ramia already mentioned about the Salima initiative, and also the initiative that she has highlighted on focusing from a faith-based perspective on being merciful to the cut and uncut, and how that is also trying to shifting norms. And then also the whole engagement of faith-based across different countries has also proven to be critical, and we are working in different countries on interfaith communities, also pushing collective interpretation of the religious texts that protect adolescent girls from FGM. And in Uganda, as Dr. Mariam has mentioned, on the cross-border FGM remains a critical issue. However, our investments in community surveillance systems, localized education campaign, particularly in border regions, have also strengthened our community response. And then guided by the grassroots mechanism on upholding the accountability by the community and monitoring of cross-border and reporting of cases by the community themselves. And then lastly, in South Sudan, we've also seen, although data remains limited, but we've also seen that community protection structures in fragile contexts and local level programming is beginning to integrate child protection within social norms, which has also proven to be critical and promising to scale up future programmings. Among many other interventions, like I mentioned, we also supporting through this global program to ensure that we support governments or local partners to strengthen accountability that are community-led. So what are we doing specifically? I think through the previous speakers, but when you also read the report, we continue and we remain committed to support countries driving legal reform through regional and global accountability. And also we've worked with so many countries to develop and also do law reform that ban or address FGM guided by CRC or CEDAW and many other. And recently, through the joint global program, we've supported the African Union to develop the prevention of harmful practices accountability framework, and we are supporting the AUC to also support countries with a scorecard on how to track their commitment or to implement commitment to ending FGM across the countries. And then we've also been supporting a couple of countries in terms of drafting legislation, as I mentioned, and also national development plans. But knowing that legislation alone could not end FGM, that's why we also stress on those other elements I said earlier on, community approaches that are driven from within, and then laws that could also support in terms of accountability. And for 2026, we are also supporting to ensure that there is sustainability. They are not projectized. We are working with different governments on how national action plans could be funded beyond the joint program. But how do we support governments to unlock domestic resources? How should we support Uganda as a country to ensure their national budget is able to support FGM or anything related to adolescent girls' empowerment, girls' education, access to services, and also protection from FGM. And then also how do we support on ensuring local justice, particularly community-led solutions. As the previous speakers have said, formal and informal justice should also be grounded from communities themselves. What works in Somalia? What would work in Indonesia? What would work in the Gambia? What would work in Uganda? Maybe lastly, also just to mention that we remain committed as
Veronica,
a joint UN.
we are out of time. Please just conclude your sentence. We are out of time.
I just finished, but I was reiterating that I think as a joint program on ending FGM, UNFP and UNICEF, we remain committed to work with all the partners across the globe and also the partnership with SIHA so that we could end FGM jointly. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Veronica, for that. We would like to hear from the in-country participants, but before I do, there are a couple of questions that have been shared in the chat, and I would like to invite the different panelists to kindly respond to them. One of them directed to you, Veronica, was why Tanzania is missing. You can go to the chat and respond because this exists there. There are a lot of comments that have come in. There is a question from Hagesan Mogadishu. Does the continued practice in marginalized and minority communities align with observations, particularly in rural and IDP settings? Dr. Mariam, if you can respond to that, and what community-led and government-supported strategies have have shown the greatest promise in breaking the silence among the deeply conservative and undeserved populations. There's also a comment reaffirming from Festo in Uganda, need for localization, and the fact that the practice is actually escalating in Uganda. So he does mention that. Thank you for your contribution. But I would like to encourage that we use the chat because our panelists will be able to respond to us. Before we come to the hubs where we have activists and grassroots organizers and collectives that have been working on FGM, I would like to go to our last speaker from Ethiopia, and this is to you, Hania. Please share with us, what is working in Ethiopia and what is not working, because we know that the practice is deeply tied to social identity and moral expectations. So how are you in Ethiopia navigating these efforts, and how are you navigating the religious or cultural belief systems to address the resistance from either the conservative structures within the community or patriarchy? So Hania, over to you. And I would like to remind all of us that we have simultaneous interpretation. Hania will be delivering her intervention in Amharic, so please check that you are in the right language. So over to you, Hania.
فينبغي عليكم أن تضغطوا على الزر المناسب بالنسبة للغة حتى
Good
تستطيعوا أن تختاروا
afternoon.
اللغة.
Thank you very much. My name is Hania Mohammed from BESA for Women Community-Based Development Association. BESA was established by high school gender-based violence associations after learning HIV was at its peak at some point. Is it working?
በዛ ሰዓት ነው
At that time,
እኛ በጣም ስንመለከተው ሴቶች ላይ
when we looked at the reality, the prevalence of FGM was very high. Harmful traditional practices were prevalent, the same for HPV. So we sat down and started discussing what we need to do as young women. So it started as a girls' club, but later on, we understood that there was an attitudinal problem towards FGM in the area. The biggest thing we did was, honestly, the awareness creation that was community-based. We started directing dramas, showing dramas in schools. At the same time, we have been in school closing, we have been teaching regarding the consequences of FGM through drama and acting. So this was one of the things we have been doing. At the same time, in order to create accessible channels for community members, especially at the occurrence of FGMs, we try to create accessible platforms. We have also been organizing coffee ceremonies in different communities and teaching about the harm FGM causes to women and girls. We have also been raising awareness through these coffee ceremonies in different communities. We've also been using local radio platforms to raise awareness. Religious leaders, legal professionals were participants in these platforms. The other one, well, since they have been using it as a source of income for the practitioners, they were receiving some sort of income from practicing FGM. So we have collaborated with organizations to help them generate income using different mechanisms. So around 150 FGM practitioners have been supported to find alternative means of livelihood. Because of that, the prevalence of FGM has decreased enormously. The other activities included awareness raising for religious leaders, elder leaders, and other community stakeholders. As a recommendation, I would like to say that
ኮላቦሬት ማድረግ አለብን ከግራስሩት ኦርጋናይዜሽን ጀምሮ
starting from grassroots organizations,
ካድርገን ምንድነው ያለውን ችግር የሚለውን ነገር በደንብ መያያዝ ይኖርብናል።
we believe that it's important to interlink and to bring together women-based organizations. It's also important to revise our laws because especially in FGM there are interventions of religion and also the spread in connection with conflicts. This type of regional webinar programs are also really helpful. It's important to learn the experiences from Somalia, from Sudan, and from other African countries. So if we share our experiences within Africa also, it's very important. At the same time, it's important to raise the capacity or to capacitate local organizations. They don't need a lot of resources. With limited resources, they can do great works. So this is what I would like to put as a recommendation. I'm very happy to have been invited here. The grassroots organizations are important, and I'm very happy that you believed in that and you have invited me to share to thank you and on behalf of my organization. Thank you. I believe I have addressed all my points.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hania. And indeed, SIHA Network values spaces like this where grassroots voices and voices of those that are often excluded can be listened to and contribute to conversations across the region. So thank you, Hania, for that and for sharing your very strong recommendations. So we would like to have this as an interactive session. We do have a poll question for all of our participants, and it will either come to you as a link, or for those of you who are joining online, it will be a question that you can respond to. We've listened to 4 amazing speakers, diverse speakers from across the Horn of Africa region, and some of them have spoken about the fact that there's a legal and policy framework, but we've seen that enforcement and data tracking remains very weak. So we want to ask you this question. In your experience, what must be done? What needs to be done? And talk to us and tell us about how accountability mechanisms, whether formal or informal, can close this gap. So on your screen for the online participants, we have 5 minutes or less to be able to respond to this. But if you're joining us from the in-country hub, you either have a QR code or you have a link. Please fill in this question, this poll question, and contribute to this conversation. What have you done? What are you doing? How do we bridge this gap? I'll just give us 5 minutes to respond to this. And we have the poll question translated in all 4 languages. Select the language you're most comfortable speaking in, reading in, and we are happy to hear from you. I'll repeat, we do have a poll question and we are making this an interactive session. So if you'd like to contribute to this conversation, there is a question that has appeared on your screen for online participants. And for those of you that are in the in-country hubs, there is either a link with a language of preference that you can choose from or a QR code that you can scan and respond to this. And we will be closing the poll question in the next 2 minutes. So we encourage you to go ahead and fill it out with your response based on your experience, the work that you're doing, and sharing how we can bridge this gap. Thank you. Okay, I think many of us are contributing to this conversation. We have had um, in-country conversations around what is working, what is not working. And before we come to you, I would just like to ask, are there any immediate questions that any of our country teams would like to raise for our speakers to respond to based on what the speakers have said? If there's any quick questions, I'll go around, maybe have 3 hands up and one person from the online audience or 2 people before we listen in to the countries on how they can contribute to this conversation. What works and what doesn't work? What methodologies, have been applied and are working? I see a question about bring the poll back. We will share this again before we close the webinar. So we will ensure that you receive the poll question back. And you can use the QR code that is on the screen. So please feel free, scan it if you're able to scan it. For those of you that would like to access it through a link, we have that has been posted in the chat, as well as in the different countries where you're joining from. And we will be able to receive your responses as you contribute to this conversation. I don't think I see some hands up. So Manal, if you can go ahead. I see Manal and then Annette Namara.
waxay aaminsan tahay inantani guurkan degdega hablaha ku dhacayo haddii aan gudi lahaa bay leedahay guurkaasi dee degdeg kuma dhicin horena uma rorteen iyadoo yar waxaa haystaa weeyaan dhaqanka adag oo weli dee aan dabar oo weli dhaqankii iyayna haysta diintii ku dar diintu waxay leedahay hablaha wax xaaraani kuma yaalle ka daaya laakiin dhaqankaa ka adag oo diidan oo le inantu haddii aan gudi waayo way ordaysaa iyadoo yar ay joogto waxay aaminsan tahay gudni bahalkan inuu hayo qodobkani inanta joojinayo ay hooyadu aaminsan tahay marka waxaan odhan lahaa ha la wado wacyigelinta iyaan laga harin
Yes, I think the lady here is asking that we as a community need to not only
dhaqanka ayaa ka adag iyada oona xeer
I think specifically the social structures in the Somali community is the one who is really empowering the existence of this cruel activity in the Somali inhabitants, and we as a community are against all forms of FGM and in whatsoever. And we encourage that we not only need to need advocacy to tackle this issue, but we also need to put more focus on the issue of the local dynamics, including the culture and also the norms. So we need to put more emphasis on the norms instead of advocacy. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. If that was Manal, Banat, do you have a question? That was more of a comment and contribution to some of the recommendations that need to be taken up. So Banat Namara, you were the second hand up for the online participants, and I will go around to the room. And for those of you that can use the chat function or the Q&A, we advise that you also do that and your questions will be responded to. Namara, please go ahead. I'm not sure if you are unable to unmute yourself, Namara. Okay, there we go.
I've unmuted myself. Hello.
Yes,
Can you hear
please
me?
go ahead. Yes, with your question.
Mine is not a question. It is just a contribution about the FGM. Majorly in our community here, FGM is basically in eastern parts of Uganda, whereby I think community-based law enforcement partnerships is far better than the law itself, whereby communities are sensitized about the effects, are sensitized about the collaboration between the police, local council, and the community leaders to report the act on FGM, stroke cutting cases. Then the effectiveness increases community trust in formal systems and improves reporting. Majorly, that is how I feel like we can bridge the gap between the community and fighting FGM.
All right, thank you, Banat. I will let Onyango be the last hand from our online participants. Go ahead, Onyango. Onyango? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Onyango from Tanzania. I really do not have a question, but I would only like to answer the poll question by saying that it is important sometimes to consider enhancing or facilitating the ability of grassroots organizations, because we deal with the victims or the communities directly. Well, I am not against efforts done by international fora collaborating with our governments, but actually it's also good to understand that some of these governments are run by corrupt and non-enthusiastic leaders who sometimes give vague reports when what is on the ground is not what is given on papers is not actually what is taking place. So I was advising that grassroots organizations actually are contacted and accountability measures and transparency measures are given out so that these issues of GBV is well tackled. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Onyango. And we will share the poll question again and request that anyone that would like to contribute to the conversation via the poll, use the poll question. I am now going to move on to a lot of our colleagues, sisters, friends that are joining us from across the region, who have had conversations around what's working, what best practices are being applied, what methodologies have been used to address this this issue, and what is not working. So I would like us to start with South Sudan, and we are going to be going to Juba. So Mama Zainab, if you can share with us in 5 minutes a summary of the rich conversation I can imagine you have had in Juba around what works and what doesn't. Over to you in Juba. As Juba is getting ready, we will be going to Wow and then coming to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So, Juba, over to you. Juba, your microphone is muted if you are speaking. Thank you.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Like I said, in South Sudan, it's not our culture to circumcise women. This is a culture that we inherited when we were one Sudan. And what I can say right now is that we are doing a lot to see that this vice is stopped by talking to women and also talking to our boys and men, because if you want something to take a real meaning, you need to include everybody. And then there was this, I can say there was a research that started 10 years ago, and it showed that the countries which are near to the north, like the Greater Baragazal and the Greater Upper Nile, FGM is going on, and I can say it was put at around 76%, which is quite high. And FGM is not only, it was not only practiced by the Muslim community per se, but also there are a few Christian communities that also practiced FGM just because they wanted to identify with the Arabs. And then in South Sudan, we have a legislation against FGM. Our Penal Code 259, if you dare circumcise a girl, you go in for 10 years and you can also be asked to pay a fine. So South Sudanese know very well that that's not their culture, but they just wanted to copy what was not ours. Right now, as I say, we are doing all our best to see that this vice is stopped from our country. We have so many organizations, but I feel that we need to work with the communities themselves to make everything simple. I can say we need to localize everything that we are doing and work with the communities, because it's the communities who are affected. Another thing I always tell boys, I always tell men, I always tell our women, you cut a girl, you hurt her. Just like one of the speakers said here, it's a very, very bad experience. It's very traumatic. The pain is too much. And I don't even know where it came from. I asked this question, where did this thing come from? And which country started it? And which year? And if it started in the last century, I tell people this is a backward thing that should never continue. And we should always say that no to FGM because the pain that the women go through. And I also did some small research and I saw women who have been circumcised. They have a lot of problem when it comes to childbearing. It's very difficult for them. And sometimes even intercourse itself becomes painful. You hurt yourself, you hurt your partner, because sometimes there are different types of FGM that are carried, which are not good at all. Some of them make penetration very hard. Some of them, I don't even want to explain it because it's very traumatic for me. And I say that it should never happen to any woman, because if God wanted women to be circumcised, He would have said it in the Quran, He would have said it in the Bible, but it's nowhere. No religion talks about circumcision for girls. So it's just something that came out of nowhere, just to make women, because I can say make women less human beings and also control their sexuality. And that is not right. Everybody has the right to enjoy what God has given them, and nobody has the right to remove it. So women in this room and our brothers who are here, please let us see that this thing is stopped and stopped and stopped, because this is not a South Sudanese culture. What is good we will take, but FGM is a very bad thing. It must be stopped and it must never, never be done to any girl. It's barbaric. Thank you very much. I hope I've used my 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much. We would also like you to use the chat to include what works and what doesn't work in Juba. And thank you for reminding us that this has been an inherited practice in South Sudan. Thanks, Mama Zainab. Let's now move on to WOW. Over to you, Tim in WOW. As Ethiopia is preparing to come next, we will have Manal from Sudan who will be sharing the experience of the Salama initiative. So over to you in WOW. You're muted. Wow. Please unmute. I would like to request the WOW team to kindly unmute their mic. We don't hear WOW. Okay, maybe we will come back to the WOW team if they are not able to. Please unmute your microphone on the... Thank you.
We think that the FGM and the violations committed against women is a human rights violation and a violation of women's rights. And if we see that FGM emanates from different sources, it starts off with pharaonic circumcision, which is extremely severe and extremely painful. It is also uses rudimentary tools, and therefore we see that this is a practice that should be curtailed. It is now widespread in WOW and in Raja specifically, and we think that it's becoming widespread amongst communities where it's not indigenous. There are a few Muslim minorities within these areas which practice it. However, we've seen that it's spreading throughout the region, and we see that it's a violation against the rights of women in Western Bahr al-Ghazal, and therefore we enjoin people within the communities to refrain from practicing this practicing this because it impacts marital relationships as well. We see that there is absolutely no religious grounds for this, and we think that this is a mutilation. We think God has created women complete and whole, and therefore we are totally against this practice. We also have examples where people think that this constitutes some kind of a purification ritual. Would think of women as being impure if they are not subjected to this practice. And this is one of the challenges that we face, these misunderstandings and these framings of how women are supposed to appear. And as I've said, this issue impacts Muslim women particularly. They associate this with purity and with cleanliness. And this is also reinforced by the practices of midwives within the communities, because the midwives have no interest in refraining from conducting these kinds of practices because it's a very lucrative source of income for them. So therefore, unfortunately, we're faced with all these challenges, and we try to debate, and we try to connect with different community members, and we try to contact people within different schools in order to actually raise awareness about the harmful impacts of these practices. And we try to advocate for the rights of girls to remain intact and to preserve their rights. In Bahr al-Ghazal, we hope that we will gain some financial and support of a non-financial type, because we feel that we need to support our compatriots in order to resist these practices, and we need to create a more cohesive society. And we need to advocate for for women's coalitions, and we need to also have the legal frameworks which support women's rights, so that we're able to come to a more equal and just society. Specifically, a society which values the roles of women and girls. So some of the questions pertain to how we are able to bridge the gaps, and how we are able to document, because we don't have the necessary documentation. We think that we really need to push hard and to raise awareness within the community as a whole, but specifically to focus on the Muslim minorities within the area, so that the youth are also implicated, because we feel that we need to work as a single unit. We think that we need to also make sure that there are prohibitive measures which are taken against the continuation of this practice, and we need to encourage the organizations would actually explain to people that there will be legal ramifications for the continued insistence to subject women to this practice. And we need to work alongside each other in order to make sure that the connection between the legal frameworks and the social resistance come together. And as we have observed, that there is a lot of continued violation of women in Sudan as well as within Somalia, and we need to question the roots and the causes for this continued for these continued violations, in order to connect between the different countries.
Thank you so much. From WOW.
The next question related to female genital mutilation. is widespread amongst different countries. So how are we going to actually face this? How are we actually going to be able to support women? How are we going to advocate for the rights of women?
Okay,
My
thank
question
you.
is about advocacy.
Yes, we will have that responded to you by Dr. Lamia, sharing some of her experience around what they've been able to do, and hopefully that will inspire you in WOW in South Sudan. So let's move over to Adis. Please, if you can come online to share with us summaries of some of your conversations you've been having about this topic.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So, well, first and foremost, we have obviously established that this is a human rights violation. It's a grave human rights violation because it violates the fundamental freedoms of women, not just one fundamental freedom, but fundamental freedoms on different counts, starting from violation of freedom from torture to non-discrimination to physical integrity to security to right to health, because this is an extreme form of violence and torture. So that is something that we have been underlining in the discussions. We also have a religious father with us in the room who has verified that this is a very serious human rights violation. And even in the discussions, one of the major and important recommendations from our religious father was the fact that when we do advocacy, when we communicate our advocacy, our campaigns, it's very much important to translate or to communicate the message we have through channels that members of those religious groups or community members will be specifically listening to or will be available to them, because if we don't have the specific channels or specific outlets where members of that community group or that religion, let's say for instance, or members of that area will not be active on it, it's not going to be very much impactful. Also, another thing that was underlined is that a major problem being is that since this is very much intertwined with religion and customary practices, even though it's stated nowhere in any religious scripture that FGM is allowed or that it's okay, since it's a community, it's kind of practiced in the community, not kind of, but it's practiced in the community. So as long as it's practiced in the community members will highly associate it with religion. So it will be very hard to distinguish this act from religion, and we need to try to create awareness in that area, try to create awareness on people, on religious leaders, and by using different means to make sure that we're not coming for religion, and that it's very different from religion, and that customary practices do not mean that it should be a vertification, or the fact that using religion as a justification for harmful practices is not an acceptable thing. Another thing is when it comes to accountability, the prosecution of these types of cases is not very much important, because again, it's as long as, even if we have the laws, it's not very much strong. There are laws in Ethiopia's criminal code that criminalize these cases, but it is not like specifically stated what it is. It's not clearly defined, even though it does state that, including the penalties and the criminalizations. But when we come to the penalties, for instance, it was raised that these acts are done in groups, so the penalties will somehow be, easier for people who are involved in these acts. So maybe one point raised was in areas that it's not very much persistent, using community practices where the community itself will condemn these kinds of acts when someone does it. Also, another major problem actually is that the mutilators are women who are using this. It's their source of income. So as long as women in that area are not economically sufficient for themselves, and as long as they don't have a source of income besides from this act, even if we have the laws, even if we condemn it, even though it will be considered as a customary practice or cultural practice, that is not okay. As long as there is no other source of income for these women, they will be coming back to this act. So it's very much important to make sure that the women in that area, also specifically the women who perform these things, when we teach them that it's not okay, we have to be able to provide for them other means of economic sufficiency or income for that. Yeah, also we try to discuss about medical practices and medical issues around this, even though it is very unethical. It's not allowed for medical professionals to perform this act. There are some sort of misinforming contents or misinforming facts. For example, stating that it is okay, FGM is okay if it is done in a safe way or if it's done medically. So when we state this, we need to make sure that we are not. Well, one of the problems was that when we say that this is not allowed, we have to make sure that it's not verified by the religion. It's just some different religious interpretations or religious religious interpretations exactly different from the religion will be using this. So there were a few things around the medical issues, but it is not exactly allowed for medical professionals to perform these acts as well. But overall, we have established that it's a human rights violation, and that as long as we try to create customary practices that do not promote this, and that we should work around schools, religious leaders, and the community, that will work. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Papa, for that. I also see there are a number of comments that have come in the chat. Thank you for contributing to this conversation. I see a comment from Louise from Djibouti, from Burundi. Thank you so much for joining. And although you say that the practice is unheard of, you're happy to be part of this space to learn what others are doing. I also see there's a comment in Arabic, so I would like to encourage Dr. Lamia, if that is a question, kindly respond to it. As Zainab, you're confirming that there's a lot that needs to be done in South Sudan and including in Raja, where this practice is very prevalent. There's another comment from Julieta. And Susan, Victor, confirming that more needs to be done around dialogues. There's also a comment from Zahara around the cross-border dynamics and talking about Capoeira and how many girls cross to have this practice implemented or done on the other side where there is no law. There's also a comment and contribution from Jimale, who says that this has been talked about for decades, and many of our speakers spoke about this at the beginning, and saying there's slow progress, and sometimes there are reversals where progress has been made, and one of the reasons could be that there's not enough political will or support from the government. So thank you so much for all of you that are sending questions, comments, and contributing to this conversation. I would now like to go over to Manal, who is going to be sharing the Selema initiative experience. So Manal, over to you. And as Manal is coming, we will have Somalia and Somaliland getting ready, as Uganda will be the last hub to share. Yes, over to you, Manal.
Okay, thank you. You hear me?
Yes,
okay.
We hear you.
Okay, thank you so much, Laureen. To save the time, I will put my contribution in some politics. What works and what doesn't work. For Sudan and for the long time, the campaign that targeting to combat these practices have many bottlenecks. I will go through three of them. One of these shortcomings or bottlenecks is that the awareness campaign dealt with the issue without including women. They are totally sidelined the men from the scene of the awareness because they consider it as a women issue. So this is can we if this awareness is like gender blind awareness, and this put a lot of obstacles of this kind of awareness. The other things that for the long time the issue or the practice of FGM practiced in the context of health issue and religious issue. Unfortunately, both these contexts being countered by the community member themselves and the parents. Because you know, and you see some posters and some photos, they put this razor, big razor, and there's a blots of big blots of blood drops. And this to scare the parents and to tell them, if you cut your daughter, there will be very serious health complications. But this doesn't work, doesn't convince even the parents, because they consider girls cut is a purification, is something that they believe in. So you cannot say message like, don't cut your girls. I believe in this cut, like I believe in Islam or believe in Jewish. So we cannot say this is kind of message, don't cut your daughter. So they will tell you that millions of women undergone these practices and then they are alive and they married, and if we don't cut our daughters, um, they will have sexual life out of wedlock, out of marriage wedlock. The third one, and which is very serious one, is that build the awareness on having classification. They classify the practice. They see the worst one is Pharaonic, there is moderate one, and there is light Sunnah. And this kind of classification, which is very serious one, they give preference for parents to choose, because we are not talking about combating FGM without giving preference for the people. So they give the parents and they give the people preferences. They see, if you don't want Pharaon is the worst one, leave it. Whether it is less worse, but leave it. Go to Sunnah. And this kind of classification opened the door for the medicalization of FGM in Sudan, because at that time, you found some gynecologists, some health cadre, they start to practice this in their private clinics. In terms of religion, so they start to say in Quran nothing. Islam is not pro FGM, but there is a space, better than wide space in the media for fuqaha to say no. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Prophet Muhammad, have many hadiths and many say that pro FGM. And all this countering to get from this bottleneck, Selima come on board. Selima is in a communication initiatives trying to pull such awareness campaign from problem focused message to solution focused message. This why Selima's slogan is that every girl born Selima, let her grow Selima, let her grow up Selima. Every girl born Selima, born Anka, Selima means bodily integrity. Here we are not talking about only don't cut your daughter, that did not work. So we have to move. Selima move to a new communication, positive messages, talking about the integrity, bodily integrity of the girl. This is why Allah created them Selima, let them grow Selima. And within the Selima, we have different kind of campaigns, like Sufara campaign, that ambassadors, Selima ambassadors, who are using actors, activists, singers, what to call it, community persons. So to send the messages in a way that to convince Selima. Also, we have like Selima contract, and we have different types of campaign on how to go to the community and to send message. As one of my colleague in Juba said in South Sudan we are not using this practice. Might be used when we were one Sudan. Here there is also a problem when those Southern Sudan became as a refugee or displaced in other places and mixed up with those who are practicing, they start to practice because it's not a part of the culture of the most of Southern Sudan tribes. But when they mixed up with those who are practicing, they became practice as they became to have like this identity because they became part of this community. So to complete all this image of being part of the new community, please your cut your daughter. Also, one of the things that now we are Salima now have been adopted by the African Union to be a model for the African countries and might be replicated. Because when we have like more than around 2 hours, we are hearing different experiences from Somaliland, from Hargeisa, from Mogadishu, from Wow. So you find there is like all of us we are standing on the same page. All of us we have the same problem, but we have different strategies to combat. So Salima, we are highly recommended Salima to be a model for the African countries because Salima have like very advanced strategies. Also, we have take this opportunity to link
Manal,
up with all this
please
and to
summarize.
happen. Okay. I want to summarize. So, Lorraine, this is we need to have contact. We need to have the materials. So, if you allow us, so it will be part of our Selima website materials, whether report, whether researches, whether podcasts, videos, all of this, and the contacts of all those who contributed to this webinar. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manal, for sharing that very exciting initiative that has worked and is being adapted across several countries and contexts. We'll be really looking forward to receiving those resources and sharing them with everyone else that has joined this webinar. So thanks again, Manal. So over to the Somali region, you have 5 minutes, and then we'll hear lastly from Festo in Uganda. So Somali region, are you ready? We are not able to hear you if your mic. Okay. Yes, if you can unmute your mic, that would be great.
Hi, hello everyone.
Hello, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Our participation is speaking behalf on Somali region, and she's gonna share with us summarize. English.
Feel free to speak in any language that you'd prefer.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Hamdi Hassan Adam, a university student, and also participants of this program today. I'm very happy this evening to share with you some of my experience. By the way, this program today and what I'm doing is it's like it's coincidence because me as a student, I'm doing a project called protection. Specifically, we are tackling on FGM and early marriage. So I'm very happy to participate in this program today. Uh, for your information, this what you call FGM it has a lot of impact when it comes to women. So and with the impact it's had is a long-term impact. So we just did what you call discussion with a different uh, people. For now, for today, before we are joining this meeting, as a team here, we discuss a lot. We are saying that what caused this FGM, what has caused it. We have came a point whereby we say that it's the issue of patriarchal norms. In Somalia, these are patriarchal norms, whereby a man is head of the family. Right? Islamically, a man is the head of the family. But the problem is when it comes to issue of FGM to our girls, the father he has the responsibility say that yes she can we can do to her this cut or we can't. So and what pushes the father is that when it comes to the marriage issue, the male, when I'm saying the male, no, patriarchal norm is that males, there are some males that they say that once the girl is not circumcised, they are not going to marry. And if it's to marry, we just pay to her what you call less dowry. Or you see, so what makes this what it means society being a girl circumcised is issue of marriage scams. When the girl is being circumcised, she's being given high or expensive dowry. So that's the issue that are existing in our country here. And as many of our participants here they are saying that it's not in our region. It's right. It's not in our region. A girl being circumcised is not in our region. Totally, it's prohibited. But this issue of culture, as I said, I'm doing that program of FGM with outside there with my teams as a student, university student. We have came up. We have sat with the different stakeholders. We did FGD, what do you call a focus group discussion. We did KII, that is the key interview informative. We did a lot of methodologies to collect what's caused this issue of FGM. So we have came across that there is no, first of all, law that exists that makes this issue of FGM being prohibited totally. And once it's done, yeah, thank you. So some instruction, sorry. There was this what they call there's no law. And if there is a law, in case there's a law, there's no enforcement. For your information, there's no law that prohibits the issue of FGM in our country here. The second thing is that there is this culture. As I say to you that in our religion, there's no issue of a girl being circumcised missing. But there is this culture. As we know that recently, this world issue, culture is more stronger than religion. People are practicing culture more. This, as I earlier said to you that patriarchal norms. You see, this patriarchal norms is the issue of culture.
هذه الأمور ممارسات أبوية وهي جزء من الثقافة في الصومال.
Okay. As I said earlier, this issue of patriarchal norms is really encouraging FGM. And the issue of being a cultural norms is culture is also part of it. You see, so culture is also one of the ways that are encouraging FGM to be conducted in our girls. So it's not good really. Girls are being affected when it comes to what do you call it? In Bali, we call it coitus. When it comes to issue of coitus, it's very hard to the girl. When it comes to the delivery, it's very hard also. All in all, this FGM has a lot of impact, a long-term impact, especially this to us. So thank you for sharing with us, and we are here also fighting for our rights so that this FGM issue to be stopped totally. So we are zero tolerance. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure to have a young person part of these conversations to address the intergenerational gap. So thank you, Somali team, for sharing some of the key driving factors that are enabling and condoning this practice. So we will hear from a last contribution from Uganda. So over to you, Festo. You're joining in online and you're working in the Sabine region where the practice is very prevalent. Festo, if you can go ahead, you have less than 5 minutes to share with us what's working and what's not working in Uganda.
Thank you. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you.
It's already evening here in Uganda. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Festo Majinjaj from Sabine Transformation Initiative, a community organization that is working in Sabay sub-region. And I want to report to all of you that Uganda has made inroads in the campaign to end female genital mutilation. And statistically in the whole country, it stands at 0.3%. But within Sabay sub-region, we still think that it's around between 3 to 6.4%, because the statistics is becoming so scanty because FGM has become a clandestine practice. When Uganda passed the Anti-FGM Act in 2010, they actually had very serious ramifications on anybody who is going to practice female genital mutilation. And therefore, communities made the practice so difficult, and they are doing it in hidden places in hotspot areas here in Sabay. But I want to report that yes, these inroads have come because of the legal and the policy framework. When the law was passed, all the sub-counties that are along the main road where they have constructed tarmac roads are not practicing FGM. FGM has now become a cross-border issue in Sabay sub-region because we border Kenya in the east and it is a porous border. So some Sabine women escape and go get circumcised or mutilated in Kenya and cross over when they are healed. And now they no longer put the marks, so we cannot now tell who is cut and who is not cut. But what has also worked well is engagement of men. I want to assure you that I am an age set who was circumcised in 1996 as a male. And therefore, my age sets have now sons who should undergo FGM, who should undergo circumcision. But the problem is you need a guest of honor. And this guest of honor should come with his mutilated wife. But because I saw that I was going to circumcise my sons and my wife is not circumcised, I had to call my age sets and told them, look, I cannot cut my wife because of this culture. It's against her rights. It's against her enjoyment. And therefore, if you want to come and we celebrate together, then don't come with your cut wives. Come with your wife fully safe. So this male engagement has actually given us inward roads. Men are not cutting their wives because we are negotiating and discussing that instead of me coming to your home with a ram that the culture promotes, let me come with money of up to Uganda shillings, $300. And you can use that to educate your sons and daughters instead of we promoting this bad culture of female genital mutilation. Then we have also with other organizations like ActionAid Uganda with support from UN Joint Program of UNFPA and UNICEF, we've developed the alternative rites of passage, where FGM, the cutting is what is it's indignified to cut a woman. But there were other aspects of the culture that promoted teaching informal education. So we've told our people, let's leave the cutting and teach the girls the informal education, how to cook, boys how to dig, how to do work, and be active in creating wealth. And that is what is giving us inroads. Then the youth-led campaigns. We are now working with young people. We've told them, don't marry cut women. Don't marry cut girls. Have a girl who has everything. They say without her clitoris, she has no network. Allow her to have a clitoris and we enjoy sex until we grow old, but not separating beds at 50 years. Then we've also invested in economic empowerment of women and girls. You know, FGM is a male thing. Men use it to dominate and fight, infringe on the rights of women. So what we have done is to empower these women using the Village Savings and Loan Association approach. We collect 25 women in a group, we teach them how to save and give them seed capital of up to 2,500,000 Ugandan shillings. And when they multiply this money, they will keep their daughters in school, keep their sons in school, and when we keep girls longer in school, those girls will not undergo FGM because they will understand the effects and the dangers of FGM. What has also worked is promotion of girl education, girl child education.
You have 30 seconds left, so if you can conclude with that point.
I'm finishing. There are setbacks. Sebei and generally Karamoja are so isolated geographically, but we are also having resistance from cultural custodians. Some of them still feel it was their culture. Then we have some men, and then weak law enforcement has also been a problem in Uganda. So thank you very much for listening to me. I submit.
Thank you so much, Festo, and thank you so much to everyone in the in-country hubs that has had this conversation prior and has been able to contribute to this vital conversation. I now want to cross over to our speakers to make their concluding and final remarks. I will start with Veronica, and then Dr. Lamia, and then Hania.
So I think my camera is acting up. Thank you so much, Lauren, and everyone who has spoken today. I'll speak in less than a minute. I think just to reiterate the conversation that we've had here, I think the whole of an ecosystem approach is important to end FGM. I think the role of government, civil society organization, men and boys, the girls, religious leaders is critical because we are really addressing female genital mutilation from a multi-sectoral approach. And then from a global program, evidence is key. What works? How do we translate evidence into action across the entire ecosystem? Just reiterating a global program, joint program commitment to the 17 countries plus any other countries that are working on a FGM. Evidence will provide, but let's promote how we use and uptake what evidences tell us that what works. Thank you so much for everyone and our survivors. I think we are here because of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Veronica, for that closing. Over to you, Dr. Lamia, to give a closing remark in less than a minute.
Thank you very much. And I'm so happy and glad that all the contribution came into a close conclusion together, that not one single approach can work by itself. We really need to have multiple approach. Because, when we concentrate on religion, like in Sudan, we use some kind of religious leader that support the abandonment of FGM, but then another set of religious leader came and approved it's part of the religion. Also, when we work on the medicalization of the FGM, some people will come and say, okay, let's have doctors and midwives trained to practice it. So whatever we are trying to do, it's going to come back and we have a backlash. But I would like to answer one question that being raised by some people, that when did FGM start? You know, FGM started before even having the heavenly religion. It started even before Moses himself. Because, you know, in Sudan and even in south of Egypt and north of Sudan, the first civilization in Africa, the mummies has been circumstances, has been cut. And, you know, even there is a proof saying that when the pharaoh of Egypt or North Sudan was afraid that somebody will give a birth to a boy, and that boy will rule all of his kingdom, they started by circumcising women. So it's not associated with Western religion, but it has been before even the heavenly religion. And it has been practiced even among Christian and Muslims and even Jewish. They have it. And that's what brings me to the idea that there must be a very deeply rooted causes that till now we haven't touched uh, yeah, clearly, and that we still need to research. Coming out from this great session, I believe that we need to collaborate together because each one of us, even the participants, not the panelists, have very extensive experience that need to be utilized together. And I would be happy to see us doing it together and work together for like this multicultural, this multifaceted project to utilize all what we have. Because when we concentrate on one thing, so we're going to lose a lot, honestly. Another thing I want to mention that marriageability is sexuality. And like Somali's friend mentioned that there is a big dowry for cut women. It also to do something with sexuality, not just like being a good wife. It's something to do with sexuality, reproductive health and right. And that's what takes us from the cut from just being a girl to an adult woman. Thank you very much, everyone, and I enjoyed that very much. And I'm going to use it for further research and input. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lamia. And as Hania is coming to give her final remarks, I would like to request everyone to turn their video on because we'll have a group photo right after she gives her concluding remarks. So please do turn your videos on. Hania, in less than 30 seconds. Hania, we don't hear you. Hania, are you there? Yes, I can hear you. Is Hania on the call? I know she was joining from a remote location in Ethiopia. So yes, if we can't hear
I'm
Hania,
here.
Dr.
I'm here.
Mariam. Okay.
I'm here. I'm here, she says.
Okay, please go ahead, Hania.
መዝጊያውን ነው
አዎ
ይቅርታ በጣም እሺ አመሰግናለሁኝ
Thank
መሀል
you
ላይ
so
ተቋርጦብኝ
much.
ስለነበረ
I'm
ነው
sorry there was an
ያው
interruption of
አሁን ባለው
network
ኮንፍሊክት
in between due to the conflict.
በጦርነቱ ምክንያት ኤፍጂኤምም የመባባስ ነገር አለው
FGM
እንዲሁም
tends to
ደግሞ
also
የሃይማኖት አባቶች
increase, religious leaders
የመፍጨር ነገር
also.
አለና
They're kind of
የግድ
becoming a
በደንብ
bit loose.
ተባብረን መስራት
Even
ይኖርብናል
now, we need to continue
እንደዚህ ደግሞ
to work in collaboration.
ሲሃ ኢትዮጵያም ሲሃ
And SIHA Ethiopia
እንደዚህ
also.
በየቋንቋችንም እንድንናገር
I'm grateful that
ይህንን
they've
መድረክ
allowed us to
በጣም
speak in our language.
አመሰግናለሁ
And
ተባብረን መስራት ይኖርብናል
we
ከሁሉም
need to
ከሃይማኖት
continue
አባቶች
collaboration with religious leaders, with CESOs,
አካል ጋር
with
በደንብ
media.
እንስራ ነው የምለው
I say let's coordinate, work together.
አመሰግናለሁ
Thank you for all your comments and contribution. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Hania. Thank you to all our incredible speakers and to each of you who joined us from across the region and beyond. As I'm just making these concluding remarks, I would like to invite us to all turn our cameras on for a photo and to be able to take a feedback survey that is going to pop up at the end of this webinar. We've had stories, amazing personal stories, and for those of you that have shared your personal journeys, thank you for trusting us and making this a safe space to share that. We've discussed what works to prevent FGM and what it means to fight a practice that's deeply personal and deeply political. And we have heard that ending FGM is not just a technical task. It's political, it's spiritual, it's culture reckoning, and it takes bold, consistent, and community-driven action across generations. So thank you again to everyone. If your question was not responded to, don't hesitate to reach out to SIHA at info@sihanet.org We would love to keep this conversation going and keep connected. So at this point, I would like to invite us to take a group photo. Please turn your video on and fill out the webinar survey. Thank you so much. And on behalf of SIHA and the We Cannot Wait team, thank you so much for joining this, and we hope to continue to connect on this issue. Thank you, everyone. So at this point, I would like to remind and request those whose cameras are off to please turn them on and smile. SIHA team, if you can let us know when you have finished taking the photo so we can pop the feedback question in the chat. Okay, I imagine the picture has been taken. So please do fill this out. It's a participant feedback survey. We would like to hear from you and also understand what other conversations you'd like to have for future webinars. So thank you so much to everyone. Please don't leave without filling in the form. We will also have a QR code that you can scan. There's a link and the questions are all translated. It will take you under 2 minutes to complete this survey. So thank you so much to everyone.
you.